Do you think that maybe this project will maybe fuel others to recreate it, to mimic it?
Well, that would be pointless.
Yeah.
If people did that, it would be to totally miss the point. You know, I think that's one of the sad things is that, you know, I get given, and I know Mikael is in the same position, I get given a lot of demos by people, and they say to you when they give you the demo, Steve, can you listen to this? I think you're going to really like it. It sounds like Porcupine Tree. And I'm like, well, why do I want to listen to it then? Why on earth would I want to listen to a copy of my band? If you know, and I think people miss the point sometimes. It's like Storm Corrosion. Okay, we've borrowed ideas from other artists. Of course we have. It's impossible to be completely unique.
But you use original sources, or at least try to.
At least we take, and I think we mix them in a way that is completely unique, and we filter them through our personality, I hope, in a way that is completely unique. Mm-hmm. So of course you will be able to point to certain points and say, they've stolen something from Comus there, or something from Opeth. And yes, we have, but I believe that the way we have filtered and mixed those influences is completely fresh. I don't think you can listen to Storm Corrosion and say that it is derivative or copying anything else as a whole. Mm-hmm. And I wish more musicians would take that as a lesson, in a way. Not a lesson, that sounds very pompous, doesn't it? But as a kind of
starting point, maybe.
Inspiration, yeah, for let's try and do something completely off the map. You know, let's borrow a bit from, you know, let's borrow a bit from this and that and this, but from very different, you know, disparate scenes. Let's combine those influences and let's filter them through our own personality and our own experience.
Is there one thing, I cannot ask Mikael, so I have to ask you about him. Was there one thing that he came up with that actually totally surprised you, that you didn't expect that it was in him, musically?
No, because I know Mikael, you know, I know Mikael is, the thing that will turn Mikael on the most musically is the thing that he doesn't necessarily understand, and I'm the same, and I think that is what connects us. If you play us something that we recognise instantly as something that we have heard before, I think it's immediately uninteresting to us. If you play us something that we're like, what the hell is that? I've never heard anything like that before, I don't understand it, I may not even like it. I remember playing Mikael, because I grew up in the 80s, I was a big fan of industrial music, and I remember playing Mikael Throbbing Gristle, my Throbbing Gristle albums for the first time. And he didn't like them, but I think he was fascinated by them. I mean, the first Throbbing Gristle album, Second Annual Report, is one of the sickest things you will ever hear. And he was playing me, this is when we first met, he was playing me stuff like Bathory and At the Gates and saying, this is really evil. And I'm saying, no, that's not evil at all. That sounds quite childish to me. Listen to Throbbing Gristle, and he was like, I've never heard of them. And I put on Slug Bait from the first Throbbing Gristle album, which is 1977, and it's one of the sickest things you will ever hear. And he was like, okay, that's really sick. Mm-hmm. And I don't think he liked it, but he understands that there is a power that comes from something completely unique and somebody completely in the zone. Not being influenced by anything else, but just there's something in them that's twisted. Mm-hmm. And I guess we have that too. We're both kind of twisted.
One last question. Music, you have it as your passion and profession, I'd say. Does that sometimes collide or crash? That maybe you have to work on a certain record for such a long time, or mix something that you come home and you're fed up with it a little bit?
I think everyone, yeah. Storm Corrosion is one of those records where that wasn't the case, because it seemed to come very, very easily, and we didn't want to overcook it. But I think generally most cases, you get to a point where you no longer relate to the music as music, and you start to relate to it as a kind of scientific process. It's very dangerous.
Are you on the edge sometimes between the...
Usually. When I'm mixing a record, or one of the record I mean, I think if you're part of the writing process, you're part of the pre-production process, you're part of the recording process, you're part of the mixing process, you're part of the mastering process, at some point you are going to stop relating to the music emotionally, and you're going to start relating to it scientifically. It's inevitable. I think most records, the people... I mean, that's why artists bring in producers and mixing engineers to try and get a fresh perspective. I'm too much of a control freak to do that. So I think, you know, there's always a danger, and I think probably most of my records are a bit overcooked. and too technically perfect. And I don't like that. You know, most of the records I really love are not perfect and they're not technically sophisticated, maybe.
But something out of your hands is always, at least until a certain point.
I can't do it. I can't do it. It's just not in my nature to be able to give it to someone else. And unfortunately, that means most of my records probably are overproduced. But you know, I maybe that's not fair. I like the sound of my records. I'm very proud of the sound of my records. But I guess what I'm saying is I'm constantly having a struggle with myself to, okay, leave it.
Maybe you should ditch some of your equipment? Could help, maybe?
I don't have a lot of equipment.
Okay.
I mean, I do everything in the computer now. I'm not one of these guys that's like, oh, you've got to have the analog this and that and analog that. You know, I love vintage sounds, but also, you know, I hire things if I need them. So it's not like I'm surrounded by gear. But of course, just having a computer these days is a recipe for, you know, in a sense, the temptation to spend months and months and months. Oh, I just moved that bass drum 10 milliseconds because it's a little... You can easily disappear up your own posterior doing that.
One last final thing. Yeah, people are speculating about it. Will it have a follow-up or...
Well, no, we're speculating about it too. I don't think we know either. You know, I think the one thing we both agree on is that we never, ever want Storm Corrosion to become a machine, a sausage, you know. We don't want Storm Corrosion to become the routine. And although we both dearly love our band, you know, the bands and the projects we've you know, Michael with Opeth and me with Porcupine Tree and Blackfield, my solo, there is a sense that when you have a successful project, it's very easy to get locked into this cycle of album to album to album. We're both dead set against that. If we do Storm Corrosion 2, it will be because we feel we have something left to say, not because people expect it or the record company want it, blah, 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 blah. So I can't tell you for sure. I couldn't, you know, we never said that we were doing Storm Corrosion until we'd written like 80–90% of it. There was no way we were going to tell anyone we were doing it until we knew that we had it. Whereas a lot of bands say, okay, we're going to the studio to make our new record and we'll release it next year. But hold on, you haven't written it yet. How do you know you're going to have anything inspired to say? And I think that's... I always say I'm making a new record, usually once I've written about 70% of it, and I'm confident that I've got the record. And I never understand these bands that say, we're about to start writing our next record, it's going to be out next year. How can you say that?
It will sound like this and this, maybe the other.
Yeah, how can you say that? It might take you 5 years to find the inspiration to make a record, you know. Anyway, so we'll see. I hope so. Fingers crossed.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you.